Over the past decade, the mainland and Hong Kong has developed massive economic and business links with each other. Through decades of reform and opening up, the mainland has also enjoyed rapid economic development. Some question whether this has diminished Hong Kong's relevance to the mainland over time. Earlier, at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, I met Victor Chu, chairman of the First Eastern Investment Group in Hong Kong. He told me, though Hong Kong's economy has shrunk relative to the rest of China because the latter is really growing very fast, it remains vital to China as a whole. You and your family has been instrumental contributing to the establishment of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange decades ago. Tell me more about that part of the family history, if you can.
The Hong Kong Stock Exchange is over 100 years old. And when my father joined in 1960, there were only 50 members, and most of them were not Chinese. They were international firms or firms from the British colonial world. And so in 1969, a number of the leading Chinese families decided to set up a second stock exchange called the Far East Exchange. And my father joined the Far East Exchange as a member of the Hong Kong Exchange. So that was quite unusual too. Eventually, Far East became the biggest one. Hong Kong Exchange was the oldest one, and there were two further smaller ones. And in 1986, the government decided to unify the four stock exchanges to create one. And the Hong Kong Stock Exchange today, as a company, has one of the largest market capitalization of all exchange companies in the world. You know, its market capitalization is larger than London, Nasdaq, and New York combined.
Very interesting to learn about the history. And now, as we know, you also interacted with China's mainland since the very beginning of China's reform and opening up, long before the company law or the corporate law was put into place, long before the security law, of course. It was only later that the mainland has all of this. Tell me, how did it work? You know, entrepreneurs from Hong Kong at the very early stage be able to work with the mainland for some common purpose.
Coming back from mainland, my expertise was on the commercial, corporate, and security side. And when I joined the Stock Exchange Governing Council in the late 80s, I thought there's an opportunity for Chinese company to use Hong Kong as a market to experiment international capital raising. So in 1991, we tried to persuade the Chinese authorities just to do that. And surprisingly, they were interested. And that was the beginning of what is today is the H-share program.
And the H-share, actually, you were instrumental in proposing the existence of the H-share. What was it like for you at the very beginning? Why do you think at that time it was so important?
I thought there was a win-win opportunity. Hong Kong was dominated by property stocks, right? And also a lot of the Hong Kong industries was already going up north, right? And our market was too narrow. In order to develop Hong Kong's market, we either have to go into venture capital market, or we have to encourage the Chinese companies to use Hong Kong. And the difficulty was, at that time, China has no company law, no securities law. And that's why those discussions at the beginning were so useful. And I was very lucky. I was in the right position to embark upon the initial discussions. And after hard work from both sides for over 2.5 years, we finally made the first set of H-shares possible in 1993.
Amazingly, people were all supporting that idea.
But the difficulties was technical one. For example, when there's a shareholders dispute with the company, the law that governs will be the law of the country of incorporation. So if it's Chinese companies coming to list in Hong Kong, it's Chinese law that will apply. But there was no Chinese law because there's no company law or securities law. So we have to fill in those gaps by way of addendum, a listing agreement, in the listing agreement between the company and the exchange, which is protected and guaranteed by the authorities in China.
I see. Fascinating history. Victor, given, I have to say this, what happened over the past year in Hong Kong, is it important for people to understand this part of history? What kinds of inspirations do you think they can draw from the real history of Hong Kong?
I think we have to understand that if Hong Kong colleagues can understand the potential of the Chinese market and how Hong Kong in the initial stages of the open door policy and the development of the capital market, Hong Kong has played a vital role. That will be win-win. And I think we're still at the beginning of that journey. Hong Kong has a lot more contribution to make, and the Chinese market is huge. The capital market development, international banking development, there's a lot more role for Hong Kong and China to work together.
But on the other hand, as part of China, Hong Kong it is also competing with other entities on the mainland. For example, from Shenzhen Stock Exchange, Shanghai Stock Exchange, we all know this. So how Hong Kong remain attractive, particularly given the recent events? That's a big question mark in many's minds. Victor?
We have to learn from each other. Shenzhen is now the Silicon Valley of the East, and that again provides a lot more opportunity, and Hong Kong have to integrate more into that market. Shanghai, of course, is the international financial center of China, but the size of the Chinese market, having Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Tianjin or Qingdao, that's completely possible. And I hope Hong Kong will continue to be helpful, to be supportive, both ways. By Chinese companies, by Chinese government, and Hong Kong entrepreneurs can continue to play the role.
What does it take for Hong Kong to continue to play a role, particularly from Hong Kong side?
I think the mainland culture in the last 40 years has really developed so quickly, and we need to catch up to it.
Like what?
For example, in terms of the technology, in terms of AI, in terms of fintech, I think mainland China leads the world. And Hong Kong needs to be part of that.
Will Hong Kong be able to accept the fact that the mainland, particularly China's mainland these days, are so advanced in those fields?
I think the vast majority of the general public understand that. There are obviously social and structural problems in Hong Kong we need to deal with. But I think long term, I'm very optimistic. I think the Hong Kong being part of China and yet being part of the international community will work in a win-win basis.
Victor, you've been living in Hong Kong for decades, and your family's business have been prospering there, and you've been contributing to Hong Kong as well. But let me ask you about the latest events in Hong Kong. What does that mean? Will this bring more division to Hong Kong? And what would that mean for Hong Kong's economy?
I think it's a wake-up call to many capitalist society when the prosperity of the system is not shared on a just basis. Sooner or later, there will be backlash. And Hong Kong being one of the freest society in the world, we are the first one to take a hit. Hong Kong will be the first to recover, having said that.
What is feeding your confidence?
Because we have a great support from mainland, the vast majority of Hong Kong colleagues understand that we have political anxiety, we have social problems, but we need to, together, we need to find a package that can satisfy most stakeholders. We need to find a new social consensus. 50 years under one country, two system does not mean that we cannot change. We need to change with time. We need to look at what has happened in the last 28 years, and we need to find a way to refine our methodologies so that we can work with our mainland colleagues closer, work in Hong Kong young people better, give them more hope, solve out our social and structural problems, and I think long term we'll be fine. We'll be competitive.
Victor, I can feel your passion and love about Hong Kong. One question is very important. So many things that we know, issues about Hong Kong that need to be dealt with. What is the leading thread?
There are two leading threads. One is that economic inequality is not acceptable in a first world city like Hong Kong. Right? We need to do much better. The second thing is there are political. It's almost like when we were approaching 1997, there were anxieties. And I think we need to find a way to show that Hong Kong, being part of China, there's a long-term future, And a long-term future means that Hong Kong, being part of China and continue to be innovative, free, and be able to play its role that the one country, two system requires.
Looking forward about Hong Kong's future, 5 years, 10 years, how fast are we going to solve the problem, and how far can Hong Kong go from here?
I think it will take a few years. It is not something we can solve tomorrow. It would take different stakeholders to achieve a cohesive and a sustainable formula to reinvent Hong Kong so that it can play a useful and constructive role under one country, two systems.
Victor Chu, always a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.